week we're extremely lucky to have with us Jo from Calvium, who Calvium residents within the studio and creating the equally magical app for this, which I'm sure you'll hear more about. And also the lovely Hannah, who is a transmedia storyteller. They've been working together on a project called Zoetrap, which I'm not going to get into too much detail about for want of jumping across anyone, but they're going to tell us all about that project. There will be some space afterwards for questions. Do chip in if you'd like to during, but there will be a chance for us to all talk about it together afterwards. So I'm going to press the go button on a piece of kit and break it. Go.
Thanks, Verity. Yeah, so I'm Jo. I'm Hannah. And I'm going to kind of start the talk, and hopefully I'm not going to do too much talking. I'm going to let Hannah do most of the talking, because I think some of the most exciting part of what went on is kind of what went on in San Francisco and all the kind of other parts of the media experience that we put together. So really, I'm going to kind of start the talk with a 10-minute intro to just the app bit, the tech bit, and how we got together. And I say, within the context that this is a small part of a larger piece that Hannah's going to go into. So just to kind of introduce how we got together, I actually did a talk at the multi-platform, CYFLA, C-Y-F, is that how you pronounce it? Coupler. In Wales, where Hannah and her colleagues were all taking a course. And after that, they contacted me and said, look, we want to really do this augmented reality game at the Story World Conference, and we'd like to have an app as part of it. Is there any chance that you kind of contribute, help us out, or do something? At the time, obviously, we were very, very busy trying to get our main App Furnace product out into market. But as luck would have it, we had a very good PhD student who was with us for the duration, called Tim Pearce from Nottingham University. And he'd done most of the work that we wanted him to do, and so we had a little bit of spare capacity. So the offer that I made to Hannah and the crew was, well, you've got a kind of 1 week window, but we'll put in a week's worth of programming effort via Tim and my support. Because what we wanted to do is say, well, we'd have loved to be able to go to Story World Conference, but we, as a small startup company, wouldn't be able to afford it. And so we saw the opportunity of using the ARG as kind of promoting our brand, to have a presence there, even though we weren't able to be there. And so we experimented with some product placement and so on, which is on all the materials, and did it that way. And so kind of it was kind of this frantic window. So that this whole app side of things was kind of done in a 2-week development time. And at the time, those of you who know, this is App Furnace of old. Our current App Furnace product, which launched afterwards, is kind of looks like this. So it's easy for designers to create apps by just dragging widgets to the screens and doing the layouts. But the time that we got together, we had a beta version that was out, and so that was the version that we used to develop this whole application. And as I say, Tim did most of the programming, and I came and finished off when he'd gone back to university. So we had this kind of desire to help, but we said, well, we can't spend a lot of time, so we'll do what we can. One of the reasons for that then, when we got together and kind of did a brainstorm about what the app would be, and you'd also, I think, had the person who did the Malcolm Tucker iPhone app, if you're familiar with that, which was kind of BAFTA-winning app that had the phone kind of sent you messages and that based on the kind of BBC series. And so I think our starting point was, well, let's use that as a design inspiration, and Hannah is going to go into kind of giving the kind of background story and context that they used. And so the idea for the app was to act as an additional means of getting access to the story, of being able to access some of the clues and to play out during the Story World Conference. So from a technical point of view, one of the challenges that we had, and from a design point of view, was how you got to synchronize things on the app. Now, with more time and budget, we would have, any budget, with a bit of budget and a bit more time, we would have looked more seriously about using Apple's push notification service to be able to do that. But because we couldn't do that, we came up with a compromise of using Twitter to synchronize things. Because what we wanted was the ability, we thought it was very important, we knew that we couldn't just create an app that worked on timings. because people are travelling from all over the place, timers go off on your phone all over the place. You couldn't rely on the fact that the conference would run to schedule and the breaks would be as planned and. So we knew, and I knew from before of working with Hazel Green on augmented reality games, that it was very important that the puppet masters have control over what they can send out and when, so that they need to be flexible enough to see what's going on the ground, what's happening in the actual play activity, to be able to kind of change something. So we have this interesting design challenge of, certainly on an iPhone app, most of the stuff's got to be on the app, unlocked and there already, so it's pre-canned, but you want to have a way of triggering it. So what we did was actually have a Twitter feed that we monitored, and we used Twitter hashtags as a way to kind of call up and activate things on the phone. And we also had the scanner in the phone and everything else. So I'll just show you a quick demo of what the actual app looked like, and then hand over to Hannah. So if I run it, you can see over here, this is the simulator of what the app looks like on the phone. There was this idea that the phone is supposed to be possessed by the missing occultist, and Hannah will go into the story there. So your phone gets possessed by this person who's messing with the spirit world. And you can look at kind of a backstory via, oh, I think I need to refresh this to start it again. You can look at the kind of messages, the backstory before you started the thing. And then occasionally this kind of spooky eye kind of comes on, and you're supposed to kind of do the things in the app.
Dare you take a spin with death?
And that's the yes, yeah. So this is the loading video that starts. I'll refresh that because it starts while you probably show some videos later. As I say, so within the app, as you started it, you could look at things. You could monitor the Twitter feeds of things that were going on in the conference, and anybody else with a hashtag, kind of occult, story world, any of those sorts of things. This document's folder, I think, Hannah, you're supposed to be a part of it. You're supposed to be able to unlock the hex code to solve clues as you went through the 3 days of the conference. You could kind of use this to kind of look up actually what was going on in the Story World conference. So you kind of had the app kind of doubled up as a quick way of getting to your event timetable. And the idea, much like the style of Malcolm Tucker app, you could read the backstory, learn about it as you went on. And then just to kind of show the Twitter mechanism, I mean obviously this is preloaded, so then from a Twitter account, you can, we had the facility that at any time, so when the breaks happened or when you wanted to, because of course the other thing you have with an iPhone app is it's not running constantly. So you couldn't guarantee that people had this on the whole time. So you had to have it flexible enough that when you did trigger these events that it would catch up. So, with the Twitter stream, it was always out there in the ether. So any time they started the app, if that had already been triggered, then it would happen. But I think also, while you were there at the conference, you tried to persuade people to kind of be looking. So then if you send, if you sent a tweet, then the idea is that the app monitored the tweet, and then eventually when it kind of picked up on that coming through the Twitter sphere, then the phone alert would come along and it would simulate a phone call. I'm quite sure how it's not working.
It works as a conference.
Yeah. And then, hold yourself off phone there.
Oh no! No! Not me! Please, not me! Don't do it! I don't mean any harm! I'm not harmless fool! Don't do it!
And so on. So, you've got So, I mean, that's kind of, an introduction to the mechanics and stuff, the app side of the experience. So I'll kind of swap seats now with Hannah and let her take you through kind of the context in which this app was set and the wider story.
Great, thanks Jay. I'll just pull up my presentation as well. Yeah, so the app was, it's on full screen. The app was all part of the Zoetrap alternate reality game, which was put on at the Storyworld Conference and Expo, which, if anybody doesn't know, that was the world's first transmedia entertainment conference over Halloween. And that brought together people from marketing, people from publishing, people from the film industry to talk seriously about ways to adopt transmedia storytelling. So a bit more about the team behind it. We'd all met on the Cuffler skill set funded training scheme. We were all working in the creative industries as writers or filmmakers, visual effects specialists, illustrators, sound production, musicians, and we were looking specifically at how to evolve our practice into multi-platform writing and production and transmedia. So on this particular brief, 13 of us contributed, and half of us were writers and half of us were producers. And we did it under the guise of a thing called Spirit Level Productions, which was actually the fictional production company for one of the central characters, Oliver Drew. And he had a business card and stuff that was around at the conference. But after the ARG... once the ARG was completed, then we kind of took over Spirit Level Productions, and it became a way for people to find out about us. So the brief, as part of the scheme that we were doing, we set a number of industry briefs by the BBC and things, and this was the brief that I was the lead on, and it was set by Alison Norrington, who is a author and transmedia storyteller, who runs Story Central Digital, which is a hub to talk about transmedia storytelling. And she was the conference chair, and she came to us and she said, I'd like you to create create and implement some transmedia ideas as fringe events around the conference. And I don't think really had the intention of them being implemented at that time. It was just to come up with some ideas. So we had to kind of persuade her that they would be good enough to take out there. So she was our mentor throughout and advised us in some of the developmental stages. And she was then an ambassador at the conference as well. She had, obviously, everyone following her Twitter feed, so she was a really good route to get some parts of the story out and retweeted. We used Twitter a lot as our go-to. We had some major challenges. We had no budget at all to speak of because we were a load of rookies who had never done an ARG before. We had no official endorsement by the Storyworld Conference as well because these were industry professionals and these were people that were really good at ARGs, and we didn't have a clue. We had no experience. And we were given the brief in June to put on in October, so we had really limited time. Plus we were working full time, this is a part-time scheme, we were doing a whole other load of industry briefs, and people had different kind of responsibilities on them. So very limited time, very limited resources, and we created, other than the app, although we created all the content and design of the app, we created all of the assets ourselves, which I'll pass around as we go through the kind of story. So it's a very DIY project, and we funded it by using crowdsourcing, and we used two different sites. We used Invested In, which I really don't recommend, because we're still trying to get the money back off there. And we've chosen them because you didn't have to set a target, you didn't have to reach a particular target, you could just raise however much and they'd give you they'd give you the money. After that, we then did one with Indiegogo, which was this site, which is a much friendlier interface. It's got good analytics, you can see who's really supporting your campaign. It's got quite a nice breakdown for different kinds of contributions and how you can reward them. So I'd really recommend that. And if you reach your target, then they only take 4%. If you don't reach your target, then they take 9%. And then two of us, myself and Tara, funded ourselves to go out to San Francisco to put it on. And Tara also held a fundraising event actually in Cardiff. So we did it on a real shoestring. And the first port of call was, and because I was a writer on the project, was really the story. And because we didn't have any kind of existing IP to attach ourselves to, like some ARGs have and benefit from, and it was a real native storytelling project, we really needed to make sure that it was an engaging story. So we spent a long time on that. And we sort of decided on two themes really. We looked at kind of San Francisco, we took Alcatraz as an inspiration, and we were looking at the occult and kind of Ouija boards. We did a bit of method devising in a way. I organised a tarot reading for everybody, and a brave few went to a graveyard in the middle of the night and did a bit of Ouija board, which didn't work actually, other than scaring the hell out of us. So after kind of a lot of brainstorming and stuff with the writers, we had two really strong stories, one of which was something I'd been working on, which was this occult transmedia inventor called Oliver Drew, who was a weird, eccentric guy who had been able to see ghosts since he was 5 years old and had been developing these transmedia projects about opening the spirit world as a platform. And he was going to Story World to say, all of you are looking at new technologies, different ways of telling stories on these various different platforms, but nobody's looked at using the spirit world and ghosts, and they're trying to communicate with us. They've been communicating with me for years, and I'm going to show you how to use them as part of your transmedia. And the idea with that story was that he would arrive, all guns blazing, meet people on the Sunday, tell them what he was going to do, and then he would disappear, leaving a kind of murder scene in his hotel room. And he would have been sucked, the idea was he was sucked into the spirit world and being punished by the spirits that he had been calling up. So, and then I'd mapped out a kind of 3-day journey through that where you'd find certain clues, you try and track him down, and you get to a final event where you find that he'd been sucked into the spirit world and you could decide whether to free him or not. So that was one element of the story. But then we had the writer, Dylan, had come up with this really great idea of a cursed Zoetrap, an old cinema machine, that trapped souls, and that was related to his character, which was Prisoner L, who was a 19th century occultist who was locked in Alcatraz for a series of horrible crimes where he killed people according to the major arcana of the tarot cards, so the Fool, the Magician, the Lover. But he was stopped just before he completed his kind of great work. He hadn't got the last one, and he was locked away. And he died in Alcatraz, and he was left in the cell. The cell was bricked up because the stench of evil was so horrible around it. Nobody wanted to get near his body, and all that made its way out was this cursed Zoetrap. So Dylan and I then kind of worked the stories together, and said, okay, what if Oliver gets his hands on this cursed Zoetrap then, and this is the means that he's using as a porthole to the spirit world. So we then created a few more characters. We created Marion, who was the great-great-granddaughter of Prisoner L, who had now had the Zoetrap in the modern day now. And she hated the Zoetrap. She just was a modest teacher in Bedgellet in Wales, and she wanted to get rid of it, but there was some weird, strange magnetic force, and she'd never got rid of it. We all sat there on the bookshelf, and she'd heard it spinning in the middle of the night and things. And Oliver Drew, because he was obsessed with the dark arts, and researched Prisoner L, and he had found out about the Zoetrap, and he tracked Marion down, and he was from North Wales as well, so he had gone to see her, and his kind of appetite for the Zoetrap was so great that he had to have it despite her warnings, and he killed her to get his hands on it. So Oliver is a murderer. And then, so that was the kind of main thrust of the story. And then, because obviously it's an ARG, we had to think about the way that we could build in a player and a bit of player agency. So the idea was that the player would hopefully be hooked in by the hotel room crime scene, and they'd be invited to become a paranormal investigator and go through all the paraphernalia that was in the room and find clues, and discover that Oliver had been captured by Prisoner L because taking the Zoetrap back to San Francisco had awoken his spirit. He was back for revenge. He had one more card to get, which was the Hanged Man, and Oliver was going to be it. And he captured him and sucked him in to punish him for the murder of his ancestor as well. And that this is the story that the players would find out, and then they go to a final event and they have to decide whether to free Oliver from the Zoetrap or not. Once they knew everything, they'd kind of become a jury, they'd stand in judgment for him. So this was the story, and then we started to think about the platforms we were going to tell it on. And we had various kind of print and online and film ideas, And we thought that the app would really be the best kind of spine to the story, because the delegates are going to be really busy at the conference, and you could ensure that you get it in their hands. It would be a kind of bit of a push narrative. So that's when we approached you guys at the end of August to say, would you think about working with us on it? And this is the kind of idea of the story and the 3-day experience. And we brought Malcolm Tucker model when we had a brainstorm here in Bristol about kind of the elements that would be on the phone and some of the fun of the jokes and things. And that we came up with the concept that this would be Oliver's missing phone, but his phone was haunted, because we like this idea that the iPhone was like the Ouija board of the 21st century or something. You know, it was kind of like a communication device, and that would be the way that the spirits contacted him. So we just, as Joe went through, we decided on the elements that would be in it: the Twitter feed, the mail messages, where you could get a lot of backstory if you were really kind of immersive player. You had a lot to discover there. You had some voicemail messages. You had a QR code would open a map function where you could go to Union Square around the corner, and that would release content to you. There was QR codes in the hotel room crime scene and in the lift, this. I'm going to use it actually, so I'll pass it around when I use it. But so just to show again this message folder, the calls coming through, what the map looked like, these kind of little jokes within the phone, and then the major thing that we sort of came up with in that Bristol time was that because we were like, okay, there's going to be a clue a day that's going to unlock this final event, but how are we going to deliver that? And so there's this great idea, this documents folder where you get 1 word a day, and this folder's been hexed. You find the 3 words, you break the curse of the spirit world, and that will open your invite. And that kind of task was written into the app, so it was kind of nicely self-contained. And we had the 3 different triggers to release the content into it. So you had the backstory, but you had the fresh content coming through QR codes, through a Twitter stream, and that was nice, as Joe said, because I could sit there and respond to people coming out of the conference space. You know, if they were a bit late on their break, then I could wait to release the content. So that was a good kind of flexibility, although I think ideally we would have had push notifications. I'll go into that when I talk about some of the lessons learned. And yeah, as Joe said, we had these 2 frantic weeks to produce it. Basically 1 week to produce the content. So Natalie, one of the team, put together this production document, and Dylan and I were drafting the app script, and then we did a 1-day shoot with all the video, all the audio. It was a crazy time, but fun. And I'll show you now some of the content. This was the ringtone, which you heard a little bit earlier. One of our team was a sound designer. So that some of the players said that really freaked them out when that first went. And they were like, "Whoa, what is this doing?" And then there was this was the message alert, because the ringtone went for audio, and the message alert went when a video was delivered.
You gotta be
And that's the voice of Prisoner Al speaking direct to you. And then some of the background audio, there was a message. We had Eva, who was Oliver's frantic girlfriend, who was, this is a bit of a plot device, he didn't have the budget to take anybody, any actors or anything. And they had a massive row on the Sunday about how he was obsessed with the occult, and he changed his personality, and he was becoming arrogant, and he was shouting Latin in his sleep. And so she went off in a huff to LA, and she was stuck in LA, she couldn't get back. So she was communicating to the people at the Story World conference, desperately saying, my boyfriend's gone missing, there's blood in his hotel room, what am I going to do? Can you tell me what's going on? And some of the background content in the phone was her getting really worried about it.
Okay, this isn't funny anymore. I'm really worried about you now. I'm scared something bad's happened. I called the hotel, they told me no one can find you. Where are you? What's this strange message on the mirror of your room? I knew we should never have messed around with that Zoetrap. We should have got rid of it after what happened to Dylan and Hannah. The hotel receptionist says they've called in the paranormal investigators. That's not normal, surely. This hanged man tarot card on your pillow. What's going on, Ollie? Oh, I told you not to meddle with the spirit. This is what I was scared of. Call me as soon as you get this message. I've got no way to get back to San Francisco from LA. I need to know you're okay.
So that's appearing on audiobook there, but that was actually within the app. So that was like your own answer phone message. And then we released live video content. And on the first day, the video content related to Prisoner Al, always, and it was this kind of strange, weird guy suddenly appearing in your phone. And you realised that he was either after you as the person with the phone, or he somehow captured Oliver. So this was...
I'm here with you now. Can you feel me? I'm just behind you. Haven't you cracked? I'm getting out, you see. So close to completing my great work. Come be one of my souls. Just a few more to collect. Go on, I dare you. Dance in the Zoetrap. Spin, spin.
I can't remember if I said this when I was explaining the story, but the idea with Prisoner L was that the 22, if he captured the 22 Major Arcana inside the Zoetrap, if he trapped their souls, then he would gain immortality. So he's still on that quest for immortality. And then on the second day, you started to get video from Oliver, and it became obvious that he was trapped inside the Zoetrap.
Help! You've got to help me, please! Please help! Oh, I'm stuck. I need you to help me get out. That word, the word that Eva said when I shouted, you need to remember it. Please. It's making my ears bleed. Please help me. Don't let us help me, please.
Put this in the full screen again. Just get through those links, sorry. So basically the content in the app delivered the backstory, so you're aware of this crazy occultist and what Oliver had been doing for the last few months, and then it delivered the main story live to you over the 3 days, so it took you on that journey through what happened. I think we were probably way too app dependent in a way, in that we made it a very centrepiece of our story, and a lot of people at the conference didn't have iPhones. So that really cut them out of lots of the experience, and they wanted to go to their hotel room, they enjoyed the hotel room, but then they couldn't get access to certain things. So on the first day we actually made the decision to take all the app content and put it online, emulate it online as well, because we hadn't really planned for that. We couldn't do it in as slick way as we would have liked to have. And also the thing with the app was that it had been downloaded prior to the conference 65 times, so there were people already looking at it, but within it the backstory is tied to dates. So Eva's voicemails were coming through on the 31st of October, the first day of the conference, which hadn't yet happened if people had already downloaded it. So that was a bit of an error. I think I naively thought you submit to the App Store and then you can tell them if it passes, okay, publish it on that day. But of course you didn't. I woke up and because it didn't go through the first time, but we had to do it a second time. And then I got a Google it, and it was just days before the conference. We didn't know whether it was going to pass. So we were like, oh, what are we going to do? It got through, and I got a Google alert through on my phone. So that was how I found out about it. So to do it again, you would make sure that you've got the dates right and you didn't tie it so specifically to dates. One of the ways we wanted to, and that also meant as well, because it was so specifically tied to dates, we couldn't really market the app beforehand, which was a real weakness. We'd like to have done that, I think. So what we were doing to market the experience was using social media, and we'd set Oliver up on Twitter and he was holding Twitter seances there, where your keyboard is a Ouija board, and he was inviting people to close their eyes and press keys, random letters and words would come out. And of course we'd rigged some of these so that words that were related to our story were coming out. And he was generally being quite annoying, controversial and eccentric, or trying to be anyway, on Twitter, and speaking within the kind of transmedia community, just so his face was out there, so people knew that there was this strange guy who was supposedly coming to open up the spirit world. We didn't really I think time is we didn't start Twitter early enough. We also, it would have been good to plan much better and much more consistently his voice. We were swapping it between people were doing different shifts and things, and we were doing a lot on the fly, and we had a spam problem at one point as well. I thought, oh god, we're going to lose all these followers, but it was quite good in a way, because it meant that we really put a lot of attention on social media so as to not lose those followers, threw out loads of content, and it ended up gaining quite a few followers through that. So that was where he was most active. He also had his own website where he talked about his previous inventions and dalliances in the spirit world, and things like he had supposedly created these Ripper goggles, which were augmented reality goggles, and you run around Whitechapel as if you're being chased by Jack the Ripper, and if he catches you, blood drips down your goggles, and children had been playing and freaking out and getting them into all sorts of trouble. And he'd also designed an ARG which he'd run stupidly during the London riots, a zombie ARG, and so he got arrested for that and things. So, and he also had a scrapbook, and this was a good chance for one of our illustrators, Robbie, who did the logo and the poster and directed some of the films. It was a good chance for him to kind of draw as if Oliver, and he drew images of Prisoner Al and self-portraits, and it was all to kind of show Oliver slowly going mad and being obsessed by the Zoetrap. We had this idea that we wanted to use Google+, but and it would have been a really nice platform to experiment with because it's so new, but we just really didn't have time to do anything much more than set up some of his backstory on there, which is a bit of a shame. Transmedia for Band came out of a conversation we had with Alison Norrington. She came down to work with us in Cardiff on a completely different project. And we'd had Nedra, who runs the Transmedia for Good network, which is all about advocacy using transmedia for social change, give us a talk. And Alison said, well, you're kind of transmedia for bad. And we're like, yes, we are. We need to set up a Facebook group and kind of set it against Nedra and create some tension and attention for Oliver that way. So we did that, but we did that quite last minute. And I contacted Nedra and said, you know, this is what we want to do, will you be in on the joke? And she was great, she was like, yeah, of course, we'll play this. And she said she had people contacting her saying, oh, I'm really worried about this other group, we heard about it. So that was quite effective. I think really with the social media stuff, we could have, purpose was to draw attention to Oliver, but we really had lots more potential to do more with it if we'd have had more time. And the final kind of thing we did with it was on the Sunday before the conference, starting on the Monday, he held his final Twitter seance, and he disappeared. His account seemed to have been hacked by a force that was talking Latin. Obviously it was Prisoner Al, and you kind of witnessed, if you were watching it, the moment that he went. And then we get to the conference, and day one of the conference, the first thing we did was send out this newspaper article, which I'll pass around, from the Paranormal Press, which gave you a kind of what had happened to him, what his intention had been, and that he'd disappeared, and invited you to go into his hotel room. Now, because we had to produce all of the assets before we got to San Francisco, we didn't know the number of the hotel room because we just hijacked a friend's room for a day. So ideally we would have had the hotel room on that newspaper article as a much more powerful hook. And the QR code linked to the app, we should have, I think, had more access points to the app than just that one. I mean, we were out talking, telling people about it, but and as well, we turned up at the conference at kind of 7 o'clock in the morning. We thought, right, it's the beginning of everything, we'll lay out the newspaper articles, you know, people will read them, be interested. They don't care about that kind of thing at that time in the morning when they've just arrived at an international conference and there's all these people they want to speak to and they're going to pitch their idea. you know, and it's pretty much to read and stuff. So they weren't really necessarily kind of jumpy at it. Oh, you know, how are we going to get them into the room and stuff? So there was an issue with thinking through those things a little bit about the motivations of the audience at different times of the day, because later in the day they really they were more relaxed, they'd done their business, and they were much more interested in going and visiting the hotel room. Because we couldn't do it on the newspaper article, we released the hotel room through Eva's Twitter feed, and that became her kind of appeal. Lacey was playing her that day, and she was then improvising and talking to some of the players in character, and encouraging them to please help her. She was frantic. She was tweeting a little bit within the Story World Conference tag too, although we were quite conscious. There was an early tweet to say, please don't spam us. So we were like, oh, okay, right, so we've got to be careful what we do here. So she was appealing, go to this room. And some people came, well, a lot of people in the end came to the crime scene. A few people trickled through in the morning, and it was absolutely the most powerful part of the experience. Because it was this live theatre, this immersive thing. What people were seeing going past on Twitter, I don't think they really cared about. It was kind of a bit ubiquitous, everyone had seen it. What the hell, you know, I'm interested in what people were saying at the conference. When they got into the room, they were like, oh, they were playing CSIs. One woman came in with a torch, and they were like, right, this is bringing the character alive. So they were more likely to download the app in the room than they were before they got there. So this is kind of what it looked like. You climb through this tape, and there was a message written backwards in the mirror in blood. There was slime and ectoplasm over the not the kitchen sink, the bathroom sink. The phones was off the hook. We'd planned out certain things in there, like we had the Zoetrap, and we had a particular tarot card strewn around, and book on the tarot, and the message on the mirror. But I'd just gone in as well and just thrown things around that were in the room, like the Holy Bible was always in her time, thrown that. People were looking at that thinking, this is significant passage. And there was a map, and they were like, oh, they want us to go out. And so that was really brilliant to watch, people really making up parts of the story themselves. And I thought, I wish we'd practiced it beforehand, because there was so much more potential to do things there and lay bits of evidence, and really have that as a self-contained story in its own right would have worked quite nicely. More of the blood, that was fun to do in the morning. And also, great things happened in the room, like if you leaned against a bed, the lights flickered, so you could sort of play with people's mind a bit, and we left the phones off the hook. And one of the first things that people kept doing actually was picking up the phone and saying, who's the last person that he called, how can we find that out? So it would be nice if you could have built a clue in that way. But the phone started squealing. People were like, somebody's contacting us. And we could have had something on the TV and stuff like that. We could have just really gone to town more with that. But what we did have was this bespoke tarot card, which Dylan had drawn up, of Oliver Drew hanging from the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hanged Man. This is what he'd become, with a QR code on the back, and that released their kind of into the app. That released their mission, which was: this phone is registering a haunting. You must solve 3 clues to exorcise any evil spirits and unlock the document folder. You have until evening of November the 2nd, which is the end of the conference, or your phone will be possessed forever. And then that's your first clue. How many tarot cards in the major arcana, and a good luck message for the phone. Just actually, I don't know if I said about the designer for the app, Paula. She had a lot of fun thinking about the aesthetic of it, and so she liked the idea of a cracked screen as if it had fallen out of Oliver's pocket on his way into the Zoetrap, and she had this great idea of the blinking eye that foreshadowed strange occurrences, and it started green and supernatural, and then it started releasing smoke, and then it went bloody and bleeding and stuff. So there were 400 delegates about at the conference, and we got 50 through the room that day, much more in the afternoon, and a lot more when everyone was having drinks at the end of the day. But unfortunately, we had to close it quite early. We had to close it like 6:30, 7, so that a friend could have it back and prepare for his pitch the next day. So we were still having people knock on the door, say, can you come in? And people the next day, and people upstairs in the hotel room as well, in the hotel, we had seen like the article in the toilets, they wanted to come in as well. But the conference crowd was a really tough crowd because they were experienced ARGers, they were kind of cynical, they were busy with their own business. They knew that there was a kind of feeling that hoaxes, people going missing in ARGs, that's kind of been done before. So they didn't really want to deal with it, even though we had our tongue firmly planted in our cheek and we had I think, brought in an interesting twist on the hoax. It was really hard work, and Adrian Hon we'd spoken to beforehand, and he said, you're going to need to go up to and approach people and take them to the room, and we really did have to do that. And again, there was that thing about timing things right and knowing what people's motivations are at the right times. And this thing about the Androids, so many people in the States, and so many more people than here had Android phones, and people said you can actually port an app to a thing called Migo, and it's available on an Android, so if we had had time and stuff, we would have done that and made it much more accessible. And after that first day, when we had this problem with the Androids, we thought we'll repeat all the content online, as I said, so we put it on Zoetrap.com. Nat at home did that for us, all the audio and all the video. Day 2 was absolutely the hardest day. The first thing that went around was this envelope, and that was good because in an ARG it's great to have that personal exclusive experience, so to hand somebody something. But inside it was another tarot card, which was different from the day 1 tarot card because it had an eye on the bottom left-hand corner, it had a different QR code on it, but it didn't look different enough, so people thought it was the same thing. So we could have done with shading it slightly differently, and probably releasing that it's a new tarot card. What we were trying to get people to do that day was go out to Union Square, where in the app there was a locative function that would release content, which was an argument between Eva and Oliver that happened on the Sunday, where she said he'd been shouting this word in his sleep, and that was the clue for your second day. We tested the app a few times before the conference started, and that function just wouldn't work. It would work in the Calvium player, but not in the app. So and that, I mean, this is such an obvious lesson, we kind of knew this anyway, but we were seduced by the idea of this possibility. Never take anything anywhere that you can't test, you haven't tested it already. So we had to enact a plan B, which was to upload that audio to AudioBoo, create a bit.ly link, and then stick this to a bench in Union Square where the X marked on the spot. So that didn't last very long in the day before whatever security in Union Square had taken that down, but it served our purpose because we were able to tweak that pitch around and stuff and still get the content out. I was really anxious the second day that nobody was at the conference seemed to care or to play, and a few people had solved the clue on the first day, but not enough probably, and so then we started to really notice the online players and give them more focus, and there was one in particular at Rowan 72 who is a member of the Unfiction crowd, and the Unfiction crowd are serious ARGers obviously, and they write about it and play them all the time. So, and she was really treating the characters, the Twitter characters, as real. So the people in the conference space were really interested in Twitter, but they were really interested in the hotel room. But she was really interested in treating the characters as real. So we really started to play her and make sure that she got access to everything that was going on. So the QR code in the lift, which if you scanned, released content as if Oliver was trapped in the lift with you. We made sure went out so that she could get it on her iPhone. As I said, I was anxious that it was just our team that was tweeting about it, not enough other people. And that people weren't going to have enough time to catch up on the clues, because we were going into the third day, they had another one to get. So, and we were going to drop the third clue on the third day, but decided that Eldritch, who was our paranormal expert, who Oliver had a tarot reading with before he disappeared, would drop the final clue early. And that was the arrangement of his tarot reading with letters appearing on the tarot card, and if you arranged the letters in a certain way, then that was your final word. And so we dropped that on the Tuesday night, hoping that people at the conference would catch up. but kind of anxious that we'd lost all the impetus and stuff. But day 3 was great because woke up in the morning, woke up at 5 o'clock, as did every day, and like every 2 hours of the night. And Rowan had solved everything, and she was really that 1990 rule, that 1% that play everything, read everything, and create within your space. And that was really, really exciting. Don't know if you can see the tweet, but she goes, "Oh, I got it. This is the clue that unlocks the hex folder." Her tweet before was the theory of what they would be. So we were like, yes, it does work. Somebody's done it. So then we released the details of the final event, which was at a bar around the corner from the hotel, which we managed to wangle for free. And this was going to be the night of the dead. This is going to be where you decide another's fate. And we hadn't anticipated that it would be somebody, she was based in New York, it would be somebody that wasn't in San Francisco that would solve it. So we were like, right, okay, well she's our great player, so we've got to reward her. So if we're having the live event, we're going to have to synchronise it with an online so that she can have a vote on Oliver's fate as well, particularly when she's the most invested in the story. So then Nat back in the UK was prepped to put the video up at exactly the same time. So Nat stayed up until 4 in the morning to do this, and we just focused on Rowan then. We stopped worrying really about who was playing at the conference, and it was really great then. It was kind of, we could relax and enjoy getting the bits of the story that we didn't necessarily think would find their way out, getting them out. So we had this ghost pamphlet going around, which was produced by our paranormal expert, and that had a QR code which released more content into the app, but it also had a ghost story about Prisoner L, and then some other like colour, and so that was going around. And Mally, who was playing Eva on the final day, she's an actress, and she was having great fun improvising with Rowan. And Rowan was coming up with all these great theories. Like she says, I have a theory that Prisoner L performed a spell to make him immortal, but it requires souls. I think that's who's coming. And these were coming through, and we were like, yes, that's what we wanted people to think. And we didn't think that they would get there that deeply. And she was saying things to Eva like, I think Ollie's good, I think his personality's been warped by the Zoetrap. Don't worry, we can save him. And really getting into it. That was the most rewarding thing. And she wrote a walkthrough then of the whole experience. And that was kind of like PR for us really on the final day. Because it was a serious ARGer, she had been playing it for 7 years. She wrote the guide to I Love Bees, which is the famous Halo ARG. She's travelled the world for them, and she was writing about this, and she wasn't saying it was bad, which was like, yes. And Yomi, another ARG creator, he said, you've mainlined because you've hit the young fiction crowd. So that was great, and she wrote this walkthrough, and the walkthrough mentioned our fundraising site, so that meant people contributed. And what we'd done with the fundraising site as well was extend it past the conference day, so players that played could contribute. So that was great. And then we had our final event, and the final event was a bit of a horror for me really, but because we had ambitious plans for it. You know, people in costumes, music, dances and things, we had no budget to do any of that. The walkthrough that Rowan had written encouraged about 10 or 15 people from the conference to come, and there were some random people in the bar as well that joined in. Like I said, there were these budget constraints. We wanted to hire a Zoetrap and put someone in it, and you know, if we could have had, we'd have had Oliver there, but instead it was all a bit lo-fi. And we played this video of Marion calling from the spirit world and at this point the players didn't know that Oliver was a murderer, they just thought that he'd been captured by Prisoner L, and this was the reveal of what he'd done. Nat in the UK put the video up at the same time for Rowan, and they then cast their vote. And just one thing I learned there as well is that somebody advised us to play more of the video content, the app content that they hadn't, the people that had come along hadn't necessarily seen yet, and that was a big mistake. because it went on too long and things, and it just taught me don't change anything at the last minute because you think that might be a great idea. If you've mapped out the experience, then just stick to it. And so people in the bar then had to make the choice on Oliver's fate, and they had these we'd done these alternate endings, so if they decided to condemn him to the Zoetrap, he turned into a bad, evil guy who had no remorse and was going to come back after them, and you saw a video of that. If they chose to free him, then he was regretful and he asked for forgiveness and he was going to go and save all the other souls. What was interesting about that is we thought that gave players enough room to have a bit of choice and influence. They wanted more than that. They wanted another version. They wanted to maybe condemn him and free the other souls and things. So we should have thought through all those different permutations, really. And Rowan made a completely different decision from the people in the bar. The people in the bar decided to condemn him, this bloodthirsty, nasty lot, and Rowan saved him. And I think that was because the people that were in the bar hadn't really experienced the story, hadn't interacted with the characters, whereas Rowan was really kind of emotionally invested in the girlfriend and wanted to bring him back for her and stuff. So a few stats from the event. We had about 20 at the final event. We had 870 tweets sent between September the 5th to December the 5th and 58 Twitterers, 159 downloads of the app to about now, 400 delegates who came into contact with it because we were kind of, we weren't allowed in the conference room on the first day, but we got a bit guerrilla about it on the second day and just went in and started planting tarot plants around and things. So they all sort of had some touch them in some way, and then 50 through the room. So I need to find a better way to calculate this, but I think that makes about 100 players with different levels of engagement, and our one super player, which is really what we needed. That was a kind of gift for us. So just to go quickly, because we're running out of time, through some of the lessons, some of the things I learned about it. I had no experience with ARGs before, so have an online option even if you've got an event-specific ARG, so that your players can so people who in New York who really want to play along can do. Also lay the experience for different players, and this is something that Joe and I have talked about since as well. It would have been nice if the app had a self-contained story to it, so people that discover it afterwards now can play it again. Maybe the hotel room plan, so you could have got a little story out of that and you wouldn't have had to do any more, wouldn't have interrupted your conference space. This was quite complex, laid over the 3 days, and if you didn't do all of the 3 days, you didn't really get all of the story. Approach people and give them exclusive content, tell them little things. The hotel room, some people were looking under the bed. One thing I really wish we'd done in the hotel room actually is in the bathroom, we had taken over the bathroom door, and you open the door and it was like a psycho scene because you had the shower curtain, and I just thought, we could have hidden someone behind the shower curtain or a skeleton in the bath or something like that. Do what we would have done more with that. We prepared the story arcs so that everyone was briefed on what the characters would do in certain circumstances, but also I think it's good to prepare to improvise at all times and respond to, because your ARGs will always be cleverer than you, as been saying, and they'll want to contribute and interact. So this was our kind of production document. We'd laid out different people's responsibilities, and we had the challenge, of course, of the time difference as well, because we were 8 hours behind it, and typically halfway through the experience the clocks went back in England, so nothing changed again. So this is just to give you what was kind of going on in the background. Like I said, good to embrace people's contributions, particularly Rowan's. I think we could have made our hooks into the story simpler. I worked out on the first day that it was much better to say, there's been a murder in the hotel, you should go to the hotel room, than say, there's this crazy occultist called Oliver Drew, da 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 da. And we had this one critical moment of engagement in the story, which was to go to the hotel room really and have the app. And if you didn't do that on the first day, then you were running to catch up, and it was probably a little bit too much effort. So we should have thought better about having lots of different rabbit holes that got people into the same place quickly, and thought more about particular timings, like maybe it's better to launch a fringe event later in the day rather than first thing in the morning when everyone's excited about what they're going to do at the conference and who they're going to meet, and they're concerned about their own kind of programme and maybe what they're pitching or presenting. There were points when I thought, I really want to speed this on, people aren't doing things quick enough, but held myself back from doing that, and that was good because people just organically discovered it. You've got to kind of step back a little bit. The planning was really in the story, and that was the really important part of it, and I'm glad we spent so long on that and we could have really, we didn't develop it even as much as we could have and should have done, because all of the technology doesn't matter obviously unless you have that story to put people in. Nobody's going to download the app unless they like the story, and not to be reliant on the technology because people might not be able to access it with the Android phones. Rehearse the live experiences so that you get, so that you realise you could do the psycho thing or you can put something in the bin. And having the plan B for the content in Union Square as well, and being quite adaptable to change. So when Rowan sold the clues early, adapting then to her circumstance and releasing information earlier. One of our videos, the final video, Marion's, was too long. It was kind of 6 minutes long, and really we found that the optimum was 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. That's it, really. That's going to be your most powerful, was our most powerful. It was really important for us to have ambassadors at the conference. We'd spent quite a lot of time. Alison was a great one, but we'd spoken to quite a few different people in the transmedia field, Nedra and Lance, we'd try and get them to speak about it and encourage people to take part. Really important for us as a load of rookies on our first one with no reputation to have those people. Again, avoiding spamming people. A big lesson in the app is for it to be more replayable, and I think having the push notifications would have been better than having the Twitter, because then we wouldn't have had to encourage people to go into the app, which we were doing really via Eva, saying things like, here's something weird going on in Olga's phone and stuff. It was all, that was a bit too clunky, and not making it device specific with the iPhone. The big thing for me was just to trust my instinct on things. When I did something that was not what I was thinking was the best thing, it always went bad. So in an ideal world, we would have had a budget, and maybe it was possible to pay for the app, and that would have been like a theatre ticket, and maybe encourage people to play along all the way through. We would have taken actors there and had them in the space, had Oliver in the space, had Eva in the space to talk to people, be around at events, had Oliver there on a Sunday before in the bar talking to people, so people really had kind of knew who he was. We as puppet masters weren't hidden enough in real life and online, I think. That was just a matter of resource and who could go out there. We were sat in the conference space talking to people as Oliver's friends, tongue-in-cheek, and also encouraging people to play the game online. I really would have liked for us to have been completely hidden in the background and it to be only the characters out in the background and only the characters on Twitter, but we had to use ourselves, all of the team, to try and encourage attention to it in the Zoetrap hashtag. We would have wanted to do that, and also we had a thing where because we were raising money for the project, Zoetrap, then we kind of had a corrupted thing. Zoetrap was supposed to be the ARG that Oliver Drew was taking out, but it was also our ARG, so people knew who the puppet masters were before we went out there as well, so that wasn't ideal. I'd say no QR codes, because QR codes are quite unfashionable, and I like this thing from Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need QR codes. And I think lots of people at the conference were a bit like that. They were like, oh, it's all layer now, it's all augmented reality, so it would be nice if we could have done that. A bit more time early on to brainstorm every permutation of the story, because some of it we were really just doing on the fly. And be more integrated into the Story World programme. We weren't officially endorsed at all, so we were really on the outskirts. And and they were so busy, the delegates, it was running through all of the breaks, it was running through all of the lunch breaks, people pitching and stuff. So there's lots we would definitely do differently, but we're really pleased that we got this great praise from a veteran ARG, and that's done us the world of good. And in the future now, what we plan to do is, what's in the process of doing, Tara's putting together a documentary. She did some filming, interviewing people out there of the experience, and we're doing a kind of legacy website where you can run through the whole ARG and experience the story, and have some kind of reflections and stuff on it, and a possible app update.
Yeah, the idea is just to have it so that the app will run as a self-contained thing, so you can kind of have it, run it like a cold case and you can do voting at the end. So
yeah, and then we're also looking for similar work, obviously, and pursuing our own projects. So that's that. I've run really close to the wire, sort of like that. But has anyone got any questions?
Just a quick one. Is this something you would consider taking to the Edinburgh Fringe? Because I think that if it was compressed and refined, it could work really well.
Yeah, definitely. And some people were saying that at the conference as well, because you take it to another festival, and I think we would definitely redesign it, and I think we'd make it a much shorter, like hour-long experience, easily digestible, because it was so complicated over 3 days and it's so specific to the event. So yeah, it would be great to take it to other places, adapt the story, and we'd love to continue the story, and we'd love to develop a film as a story, or maybe a Zoetrap 2 kind of ARG. So yeah, definitely still playing that story world. There's loads of aspects of it that haven't been gone through and stuff yet.
The trouble with it being an event seems to be that everybody's distracted by what they're doing the event for. And my question was the opposite way, was would you consider doing it not as an event?
Say again, sorry?
Not as an event. In other words, you do it where only the people who want to do that
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And if that had been the case, you would have got much more immersion, and maybe that would be more of a kind of ticket buying experience. So people had put down their money and they were like, right, yes, this is what we're going to do. It's ironic, really. It's a transmedia conference. This was a transmedia production, but nobody who was interested in does it on a daily basis could possibly play. I mean, some people weren't interested anyway. It's not going to appeal to everyone, but yeah, they were just blasted out and unable to do it. Yeah, it'd be fun to do it just as in a fiction, like a film or something. Yeah.
How many people were in the project again?
13 people in the team, but various levels of involvement because of different responsibilities on other groups and things. So it's sort of day and night.
I'm aware we've run over a little bit. I know people want to get back to work afterwards. I think I'm right in saying you guys are going to hang on for a few minutes, so if anybody's got any specific questions, you can come and have a chat directly. But I'd just like to say thank you so much for taking us through that incredible world. That's really amazing. So thank you very much.